Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to have you tuned in to our webinar for the regional insights on culture shift in the workplace. It is geared to help organizations learn from the best workplaces through the eyes of Great Place to Work. This webinar is hosted by Great Place to Work in Sri Lanka. Great Place to Work is a global authority on workplace culture, having globally surveyed more than 100 million employees over 30 years, has helped us understand that it is trust that defines a great workplace. Great Place to Work helps organizations quantify their culture and produce better business results by creating high trust employee experiences for all your employees, which leads to a high performance culture, thus leading to organizations that are better for people, better for business, and better for the world. We would like to understand the current perspective of our participants today. So we will have a quick poll question for you to start off this discussion. You should be seeing the poll now on your screen. Select the answer that best seems best to you in this situation. What is the biggest challenge you are facing right now? Is it regarding effective communication or maintaining visibility during this pandemic crisis? Is it staying connected to your team? Is it about managing employee well-being or balancing the care versus the performance in your employees and teams? Or is it about restructuring your organization, certain role changes or retrenchment that is required in tough times? Let us know your opinion. Right. Thank you very much for your answers. I think we can, share the screen very quickly to see what the answers look like. Right. So we see that managing employee well-being and balancing care versus performance seems to be the forerunner in this case with 45% of people. But we can see that definitely there is some areas covered by all our participants. So thank you very much for your answers. That helps us understand where you're coming from today. Now to move on to the panel discussion. Today, we have with us two Great Place to Work leaders from the region who are handling some of the biggest markets in Asia. Firstly, Jose Carlos Benzanilla, CEO of Great Place to Work in Greater China, which also includes Hong Kong and Taiwan as well. He was also part of the Great Place to Work Mexico team as a director for 5 years before this role. Jose has now been working in the area of organizational development consulting and leadership management for over 18 years. He has been a board member in various chambers and businesses. And before his time at Great Place to Work, he has also spent a decade in the banking industry. Secondly, we have with us Prasanjit Bhattacharya, CEO of Great Place to Work in India, co-founder and director of the Great Manager Institute, and director of Great Place to Work in Sri Lanka. Prasanjit, or better known as PJ to us, has worked closely as an internal HR consultant and an external consultant with senior management teams at various organizations in the area of change management. He has 2 decades of experience at Indian and multinational corporations such as HSBC, Siemens, and Crompton Greaves. And lastly, we warmly welcome Mrs. Shanika Ratnayakar, CEO of Great Place to Work in Sri Lanka, to moderate this panel. Over to you, Shanika.
Thank you, Ruani, for that introduction. And let me start by extending a warm welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening. Jose and PJ, thank you for committing your time in spite of your busy schedule. We at Great Place to Work have conducted 7 webinars since the pandemic hit us. But this is the first time that we'll be sharing regional insights, and we are grateful to both of you for facilitating same. Our focus today is on the culture shift that is taking place in the workplace regionally. So let me start with Jose first. Since you see the sunrise before us every day in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, wherever you may be, and also because we have less perspective on the current climate in in your region. Jose, China is where the pandemic first raised its ugly head, approximately this time last year, right? So 1 year on, what is the climate related to the pandemic in your region, and what impact has it had on the workplace in general?
Well, first of all, Shanika, thank you for having me. I'm very, very honored, and I hope I can contribute something positive and pick the brains of all the invitees in this meeting. So yes,
Sure.
you're right. Around this time of the year last year, we were notified that there was a virus starting nearby, actually 3 years flight from here. And it was just probably an anecdotal thing until January 27 that we were finishing our strategic meeting. And the very next day we were flying out for Chinese New Year holidays. And many of us, we didn't know that some of us, we were not even able to come back because the whole China was closed down in a very strict lockdown, stricter than any other place in the world, actually. And that's why, yes, it started here, but also it ended here as well. Fast, very well managed in a very positive way, but in a very beneficial way, because at the end, well, what is happening today, mainland China remains closed. Their borders are somehow closed. Just a few people can come in and out with a lot of restrictions. But what is happening there? Well, the business and the life is back to 99% normal. There are some places that are having day-to-day events like this one, but live events. And kids are going to school. I mean, like almost back to normal. People are not wearing any more masks on the street and things like that. They're using one thing that is very special that implemented by the government. In your cell phone, you are obligated to have your category in 3 levels: green, yellow, red. And it's a code that is assigned to you based on the current situation of your health. If you are green, you can go in and out everywhere. If you're yellow, you can just go for certain very specific tasks and errands. And if you're red, what are you doing out here? You're going to be taken to jail with a very, very high fine. And well, Hong Kong, still under semi-lockdown, still closed. We have a lot of particularities, and we strongly believe that is because many of these restrictions remain because of the political situation that we had for the past year and a half, where we had very, very strong demonstrations. But now with the security law and with this pandemic, it's a very convenient situation just to keep everybody apart. And that's how it's today. Even though we can go out, we can go to restaurants, we can have gatherings, but just a little bit limited. And Taiwan has done an amazing job as well to take care of the pandemic under the leadership of a woman, which is outstanding in terms of what has been in comparison. They've been doing amazingly good. They've been keeping the numbers super, super low, and number of deaths actually almost non-existent. So they've been doing their life normal. They're closed, and they have a lot of protocol to get in, but they're doing pretty good. The amazing points about these quick stories that I'm summarizing here is that economy is going back. It's going back in a pretty good level, almost in every geography of the region. Of course, it's damaged by the economies around. And you know that China has a very heavy codependence with the rest of the economies. They are importing and exporting mostly lots of stuff. And since the commerce elsewhere is going down, they're feeling the heat as well. But internally, it's being very, very beneficial for them, because internally the market is developing in a Chinese speed, as you know, the expression. They're moving always super fast, and now this pandemic brought, among bad news, brought very good news about how strong the internal consumption is becoming, and how strong they are becoming as economy and everything. So they're doing pretty good. I think that's the summary that you wanted me to tell you about.
Yes, very, very interesting, because while there are similarities, there are also very different things, or things that they have been very successful in managing the crisis in this part of the world, very differently to how it's managed in some other parts of Asia, and as well as in the West, where it has been mostly open, and people are allowed to move around easily, and as usual contract the virus easily as well. So what impact has this had on the workplace, and how has that really changed the way we work from the norms that we had pre-COVID?
I think it's very similar to most of other places, apart from the situation that now mainland China is back to the office, back to the plants, back to the hotels, back to actually the recent holidays. They had a record high number of people traveling within China. Record high in China, you can imagine how many millions of people traveled, not necessarily smoothly, but effectively and with peace of mind about any health issue. So in that sense, it's recovering. But when it hit, definitely it created a lot of confusion, a lot of disinformation, a lot of learning had to happen overnight about what to do, how to do. It's important to know that in the previous health crisis that hit hard in this region, the SARS,
yes,
it was pretty hard. Nothing comparable to this, of course, but there were already a lot of learnings. I was very surprised how the people locally reacted immediately to wear the mask, have distance, disinfect everything, wash their hands. It was already in them. And I think that was a big advantage about how to handle the whole thing, because even before policies dictated by the central governments, they were already doing a lot of stuff to avoid any dissemination, and that was very effective. Then
exactly.
In the workplace, they immediately reacted by saying, stay home, work from home. I mean, you know that some industries can, some industries not necessarily. But even in the worst time of the pandemic, I was able to go to any restaurant around in town. So that was very different particularly for these industries that were hit really hard because of lockdowns or closing, like hotels, and here never happened. It was tough, has been tough. It was low, particularly after the 2 years of social demonstrations, has been really tough, but not as hard. And the leaders knew what to do, knew somehow what to do. And the expectation at that point was that it's going to be somehow short. We never in our wildest dreams imagined how long would it be, right? So first, a little bit of confusion, but with the experience of previous situations, they acted spontaneously and voluntarily in that way. Then government came, started giving some policies. They were aligned, and the recovery was rather fast. Never with a full lockdown, and that meant that people, and with a short expectation, people never felt anxious or nervous, like really deep about it. So it is very particular in that sense how safe and well managed was. Of course they were hit. Of course there's a lot of changes. Of course the work from home took longer than expected. Of course there were a lot of changes that I'm pretty sure we will be talking about as we go ahead, but definitely a very special situation that gave origin to all these conspiratory things that, oh, this is very weird. How come it started in China and they got rid of it so easily? How come such a big country with only 80,000 cases where we have countries way smaller and they have way above these numbers? Well, the thing is that they managed and they contained and they gave policies that, as we were talking before, they were not questions or suggestions. They were indications to be just implemented, right? And I know from sources that a lot of the companies that are multinationals and they have their headquarters elsewhere, they were reporting to them how different things were being managed. And actually, I know that a lot were giving instructions to their headquarters and other branches elsewhere about how to do things because they were seeing success about how they were handling things locally.
Excellent, excellent. So that actually tells us, reminds us why we must use all experiences to learn from, because obviously China as a country has benefited from previous pandemic of sorts or disease that had restrictions like this as well. If we can move on to PJ in a similar sense, but since we already have a better view of the climate in India, our neighbor who we regularly monitor, we would like to understand from you, PJ, what has shifted in terms of workplace culture purely due to COVID? What of the culture has changed because of COVID?
Yes, and just to quickly respond to the brilliant case study of China that JC has been talking about, and they have done such a wonderful job. I think with hindsight, India has done a wonderful job of producing maximum number of antibodies in maximum number of people. And I think the way it happened is, even though the official rates of people who are tested is probably less than 10 million, and officially the mortality rate is less than 1.5, but, and then I'm not an expert, so therefore don't hold me to it, but the chances are that a far more number of people have actually been infected, which means that the mortality rate could be as low as 0.4% or so, in which case it is almost comparable to the seasonal flu. And of course, the infrastructure being what it is a huge drag. There has been a huge impact on the economy. However, the workplace culture question that you have raised, Shanika, is very interesting, because if I were to, and we have been mapping workplace cultures over decades in at Great Place to Work. So therefore, if I were to quickly give you a panoramic view of how it has shifted, if you recall, we come from a generation where people used to seek job security, and that was the market. The market was for job security because there were not too many jobs available, and the currency was power. And people used to work and struggle and toil and align with senior managers for many, many years, because they will become senior managers, in which case they will be very powerful. You can decline to sign the leave application of your team member, or you can give a contract, and so on and so forth, and all the perquisites of power which were associated with that generation, my generation. And then what happened is, and this coincided to a large extent with Great Place to Work, Robert Levering writing the first book on the 100 best workplaces in America. And we call this the Great Place to Work era, and where it was all about attracting talent, because you knew that talent would make a disproportionate impact on business. And therefore it was the marketplace became a market for employee experience. And when you are competing with others to give that kind of an employee experience, so the currency is career growth and opportunities. So therefore we had, my generation can loosely be called as the no vacancy generation, because wherever we used to go, there was no vacancy signs all around, even in the movies in India at that time. So this generation was very, very different. So therefore, I would call them the entitled generation. There is a sense of entitlement that I am talent, I am really good. If you don't give me what I deserve, there are others who can give it to me. So the supply-demand change happened, and that was the Great Place to Work story. And COVID changed, I think, many things fundamentally. And for the first time, even the entitled generation realized that there are things which can happen that can upset the apple cart. I know if you recall, we have been to so many conferences and seminars about disruption of work, the future of work. And every kid would tell you that thanks to technology and analytics, the big fat organization is dead. And HR is now more of a sales and marketing kind of function. So we and millennials, by the way, are a different breed. They do not like to exchange their life and work-life balance for that perceived glory and power that they are going to get after 10 years or 20 years. Now, none of us predicted that a virus is going to change our lives and correct. Everything else, right? There is nobody. And I think whoever says that he predicted, and I think there's some video of Bill Gates, but I think the rest of us had no clue at all. So what it fundamentally did, according to me, is that it very clearly showed a mirror. There are best workplaces who did all they could to protect employees, to protect jobs, to protect salaries, even dipping into their reserves at times or taking loans at times. But a large majority of organizations also said that if we are not earning enough money, then we probably can't protect your salary, and sometimes we can't protect your jobs. And for the first time, a lot of people, and to some extent it was there in 2007-8, but to a minimal extent, but a lot of people today realized that leaving your career in the hands of the organization and management and is not possibly the best strategy. So from an entitled generation, and look at the funny thing that happened. I mean, we used to talk about Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials. Where are all those generations now? There is just one generation, post-COVID generation, right? And therefore, culture change has become easy, but most people, I think, have realized today that this is a market for relevance. It has moved beyond employee experience. It is a market for staying relevant. And if the market is for relevance, then the currency is learning, or to be more precise, learning ability. At any point in time, right now, for example, people know me as CEO of Great Place to Work. I can speak authoritatively on employee engagement, trust, but I'm building my second career, which is around diversity and inclusion, right? And potentially, I may even have a third career as a safari guide to places in India which are not accessible easily, because that's what I'm doing, a couple of weekends every month. So each one of us is now trying to have at least three curves. We are reinventing. There is one curve where we are already at the top. We have mastered it. There is another curve where we are just going up, because we realize that in future, it's not so much what we have done in the past, expecting that managements and organizations will tell us what to do, and we will do it, and they will provide us a career. And to a large extent, we probably have to move our mindset from passive to active, where we take charge. Shanika?
Interesting, very interesting take, PJ, as always, on the culture shift in the workplace. Could I just move back to Jose quickly to try and understand how, if you can explain to us or share with us how best workplaces in your region have dealt with this disruption. I'm talking about actual organizations, and some insights on how on these organizations across different industries, maybe, so that our audience gets to get to understand what different circumstances are being handled differently in those industries.
Yeah, of course. I have to keep my line of explaining that I have two realities that sometimes they coincide in many things, but in some things are very, very different.
Different, yeah.
So bear with me here, and I will start by talking about mainland China, where we have the big majority of customers, and it was interesting because they somehow tackled the challenge by first reacting, then responding to it, then returning, seeing how to return to what now everybody's calling the new normal.
New normal, yes.
But now they're talking about transforming. Based on the learnings of what happened, now they're thinking about, okay, so what is going to change for good? When they were returning, they were realizing that many, many things were just simply not being able to happen again as we were used to be, right? Some things were, some definitely not, but they required not reaction, they required redesign, redefinition, transformation. And that has been a very interesting learning, which is what we mainly do in Great Place to Work when we engage in the relationship with our customers. As you know, when we are talking about their culture audit when we are delivering results, or when we are planning actually the real projects, we interact with them in such an intense way that we get to understand where are they and what is happening. And since the intensity of this moment has been very, very relevant, we are engaging much more deeper and much more commonly in these kind of conversations. And so when they were reacting and when they were moving to the industries that are allowed, that are able to do work from home, most of them, they did professional services, IT, and all these big chunks of organizations. They were moving to work from home, and the experience was, well, after the shock, they were realizing that, for example, there's a lot of saying that they got to be more productive, right? And they were solving a lot more issues because, first, they were not commuting, so they were not losing that time. Second, they had no distractions. Hey, let's go for the coffee, let's go for this, let's go for that. Well, they were there. And so their time to solve things was easier, was faster. And also, it was more interactive. This facility, the situation was facilitated by the technology, and having these applications that we are getting more and more used to handle, they were solving a lot of things that in the past were not necessarily as efficient because they had to move physically somewhere, gather, go through the noise, and then start to solve things. And now they are doing it in a much more efficient way. But that's on the positive side. On the not so positive, the leaders were very confused about how to deal with the control. A lot of them that are still wired in the control way, they were feeling very anxious of losing that control, just losing the sight of the people. They were getting very anxious. And about supervising and looking over the shoulder of the people, it was it has been very challenging for them. And that has been, in terms of the leadership, the biggest challenges, together with another that is kind of for everybody, which is wellness. The breaking the boundaries of work-life balance has been very, very tough. So yes, more productive, yes, probably more concentrated, but also more tired. And it's also logical if you think about it. If you are really concentrated on something, if you're really solving things, if you're really answering emails, well, you will feel rather tired sooner than later. And if you are not having these distractions that somehow level up with your levels of neurotransmitters that will help you, probably you will need definitely much more boundaries there. And the intimacy, right? When you are at home, and your kids are showing up in front of the screen when you're having a meeting like this, when your wife is calling somebody, when, oh my God, and some of us may have the space to dedicate for this, but most of the people, they don't. And from that, all the equipment that was needed, and then the ergonomics, because at the beginning, the response was for 2 weeks, but then a month, but then 6 months, but then, and then, for example, that I'm coming back to Hong Kong, still work from office. You have to consider so many things about, okay, so you're continue in your home, at least I'm going to provide a chair. At least I'm going to be sure that your connection to internet, it's sufficient, it's enough. If you needed a special computer and a firewall installation, so many challenges that were faced. But going back to the core of what you were asking, the main challenges and the main situations that leadership and workplaces are facing are those, depending on the industry. Wellness, definitely, and control, or what I call the golden opportunity for leaders, because what we promote in Great Place to Work is trust, and this is the most sought for situation that we are seeing, that it's so useful, so it facilitates so much the empowerment that you need to administrate that situation like this, which is trust. You need to manage trust in a much more efficient way. And it's an amazing opportunity for leaders to actually learn about that and enact all these theories and things that we were talking about. So for us has been an amazingly busy time, because everybody wants to listen how to handle all this. And when we talk about trust, they find a lot of answers, and we are very happy about it. I don't know if I'm helping with all this, Shanika.
Well, no, it is very interesting, Jose, but could you touch on some of, or maybe mention who may have been more successful in some of these, in terms of your best workplaces that have got it right? I'm not looking for right versus wrong, but obviously some would have been more challenged than others. Some who had exceptionally good responses to this, and what was the differentiator in that kind of situation?
Yeah, with the fear of leaving out a lot of very good organizations, I will comes to my mind that, for example, about the wellness support, Microsoft has been doing an amazing work, amazing work. DHL has been doing an amazing work reaching out, because if you think about it, Microsoft is professional services. There's a lot of work that can be done from home, and they've been doing amazingly good about it. And then, therefore, what they did was very creatively bring all these sessions of support for wellness to the virtual environments. And they've been very creative and effective about it. Not only about doing them, but if you think about it, and if you agree with me, to keep the engagement of your colleagues on this new recipe of doing yoga or doing positive psychology or things like that. Because, well, when you're live, you can just run away. But when you're like this, it's more difficult. So they've been doing a lot, and really cool. But when you are a company like DHL, that most of your people are doing deliveries, and they are walking on the street, actually, the level of risk for them is higher. And they, of course, felt immediately much more anxious about doing their work, because it has to be done out there, walking on the street, going door to door, meeting with so many people. Sometimes you know somebody that is sick and you have extra preventions, but sometimes you don't. So all the reassurance that was given by very detailed protocols established by the management about how to handle each and every single detailed interactions of their people delivering packages and picking up, it was amazing. It was amazing because the people really felt the support, but not only in a feeling, which is of course needed, but in reality. They had to change a lot of their habits. They had to adjust so many things, but they were being guided every step of the way in a lot of details to deliver in the right way. So it was amazing
Excellent.
what they did about that.
Right. But
If
we
you want
also
me to add another example, yeah?
Sure, sure. Please, I
Yes.
would like to try and understand what it is like for industries that are having a much rougher time, hospitality
Exactly.
or any.
Well,
right, yeah.
I wanted to make the move from,
Okay.
I'm not saying they've had it
Positive to-
easy in Microsoft, but I mean, you know,
Yeah,
and then
understood.
DHL that was kind of in the middle.
In
But then
between, yeah.
what about these traveling industries or hospitality industries? We had a chance to meet with the CEO of Hilton in a very nice property here in Shenzhen just before everything was closed. And they were telling us amazing stuff. And since then, we've been like following up very closely with them. And imagine that from, if we can say it figuratively, from day to night, they were not having people coming to your property, right? And they were having people just wandering around. They took advantage of the situation to clean up, to walk through all the processes of emergency, all the many things that you normally don't have time or you don't have the property available to do the rehearsals. They walked through all of them, but once they were done with all of them, they needed to do something else. And resilience and creativity came onto the situation, and they started rethinking about who we are and what are we doing here. What are we doing here if this is going to stay for long? Nobody knows how long would it be, but if this is for here to stay, what are we going to do? And they are doing an amazing job reinventing the staycation, for example. Mm-hmm. Something in which many of them put a lot of ideas and a lot of very creative solutions to cater for people that normally they didn't visit them, right? They're neighbors, but well, I don't have to go to you because I go elsewhere. But now they were doing that, and they were offering an amazing experience, still with their standards of service, the standards of quality, the standards of having a great experience. So airlines had it probably the rougher here in Hong Kong. The rougher situation was for airlines. And you probably know from the news, they are having very, very hard time. They're letting go a lot of people, which was the worst of the scenarios. Many of these previous industries that I mentioned, every now and then they needed to talk about letting go a few people, maybe not rehiring, maybe not covering positions, but not necessarily letting go, layoffs. In China, very, very little. Here in Hong Kong, with these industries, yes, it's sad, but a little bit more. Taiwan, also very healthy.
Thank you, Jose. Lovely to hear about the different experiences across multiple industries at different levels of the way they have had to react and the actions they have needed to take. If I could move on to PJ and check with him. PJ, if you could share with us too some examples of what best workplaces are doing in India, maybe across some industries that Jose hasn't touched on, or some other examples that we could work with. You're on mute, PJ.
One industry which is doing phenomenally well is the global shared services, which are based out of India. And it's a very interesting story that Tesco has a global shared services in India. And at one point in time in UK, 50,000 employees of Tesco were under quarantine. And they had to recruit 50,000 replacements with a very short notice, because quarantine would mean 21 days at that time. And all of that is done out of India. So the work for the India operations went up by 50% or so overnight. So therefore, it's just like COVID strikes you today, and in the next 15 days, your volumes go up by 50%, which is a very different story from what you hear in most organizations. And that's where they had to be really, really prepared. How do you deal with this kind of volume when people are all working from home? So 1,000 laptops had to be procured they had to really simplify things and concentrate on what Dr. Sumit Mitra, the CEO in India, calls as brilliant basics. And brilliant basics means there's a team that goes and finds out, do you have the right infrastructure at home? Do you need an ergonomic chair? Do you have the Wi-Fi? And then JC talked about it. By the way, we are going to pay for your part of your electricity bill and of course the Wi-Fi, because this is being used for, for office work. And by the way, the insurance cover now not only covers you, but also covers your dependent parents. And we have added an additional amount for COVID-related hospitalization. So all of those are the things which they did superbly well. And I suspect now that Tesco head office knows the capability of the shared services in India, even after things become normal in UK and elsewhere, a lot of the work will continue to be with them. So therefore, these industries, HSBC, again, similar story for the shared services, they have benefited. I think if I were to look at industries which have really transformed themselves, there are some local, you mentioned about the courier industry. So there is a local courier company called DTDC in India, desk to desk courier. And initially, of course, everyone thought that the courier industry is going to be very badly impacted. Now, it was amazing how they reinvented themselves overnight. So they converted themselves into a hyper-local kind of delivery service. So that means that in the same city, if you need groceries, if you need medicines, if you need anything else, and in the initial period, getting stuff was difficult because there was a very hard lockdown that was implemented. And like DTDC, there is a Diageo, for example, manufactures alcohol. And guess what? There is some commonality between the alcohol they produce and the hand sanitizers that everyone uses. and so they
65% alcohol.
They said we are sitting on such large quantities of raw material for hand sanitizers. Why don't we produce sanitizers in the first place? So initially, what started off as a social service kind of initiative actually became a commercial initiative. They took and they're now doing it in a very large industrial scale. The hospitality industry is in very bad trouble, but there are best workplaces like the Lemon Tree Hotel, which is also known for their diversity. 25% of their employees are either differently abled or disadvantaged in some ways. So they have 8,000 people. So to protect the jobs of 8,000 people, the top 1,000 people voluntarily took a 65% cut in salary. And the amazing thing that happened is that, well, some of their hotels were still in use because the government requisitioned some of their hotels for essential, medical and other sort of staff. But
Sure.
and the other thing that happened is, there were some people from outside India who were stuck in the hotel because if 21 days they could move out, etc.
Sure.
That's a captive kind of an audience. But by their, they got down costs by at least 30%. Their manning ratios got down by 20%. And I'm talking about 20% even if the hotel were to be fully occupied.
Fully, right.
So therefore, by their, the Patu Keswani, the CEO, was saying their operating leverage is going to go up by 10% at the minimum. And in the meanwhile, while they're not recruiting people, they're actually thinking and scouting new properties, and they're also looking at this as an opportunity to buy out a few other sort of hotel companies who might want to sell at this point in time. So as Patu says, in a very serendipitous way, he is now scanning for takeover opportunities. So that's also something which is there for some organizations. Very, very impressed in retail with Lifestyle, which is part of the Landmark Group. It's a huge organization, and retail, 4 months of revenue is
Lockdown.
gone. 4 months of revenue gone means that their entire balance sheet is gone for the year. They're not going to recover. They're going to be in losses. in March, even though things are now turning up. But to protect jobs, for the first time, they took a loan of what is 1,000 crore, or I don't know, 10,000 million, or whatever is your equivalent. And this is something which employees appreciate. They in fact went to their suppliers and said that we know that you will be under cash crunch right now, and do you want some payment in advance? There are some suppliers who are very small, medium sector kind of companies. So for 3 months, their foundation was giving them rations. So Godrej Consumer, for example, went to their suppliers and said that we know that you have a problem of working capital for raw materials. How about we pay you what you're going to supply in advance? And we charge a very small nominal interest rate. And what you can do is that will help you to supply us on time. So the suppliers' employees are unlikely to forget what happened at this point in time. And I keep saying that at this point in time, either you have done your deposit in the trust bank, in which case you are going to get a huge dividend out of that trust bank, or if you have taken out from the trust bank, then you have to pay what is called as
Debits.
As debits or lack of trust premium, and therefore you will find it more difficult to get people to join you at the same salaries, or suppliers to supply you the same kind of price.
Very, very interesting, Peter. Very, very heartwarming stories across different aspects and initiatives that organizations have taken really to put their people first and to manage during this pandemic time. But I'm sure, as always, some organizations or industries would have been heavily challenged, even great workplaces. What are some of the biggest challenges that you saw, if you were to take it as common areas? What were the common challenges that most organizations, particularly best workplaces, were experienced during this time?
Well, one big challenge is that you have to prioritize. So, for example, ACT is a organization in India which is which is an internet service provider, and broadband services is the business that they are in. They cannot do their business by sitting at home. So people have to go and put those connections, and the demand went up and shot up like crazy for broadband. And what do you do? How much do you put your employees at risk? Do you deal with customers? So therefore, some guidelines and principles had to be made. For example, in case of ACT, what they said is, first and foremost, priority is the safety of my employees. So therefore, whatever are those personal protective equipment or gears that are required. Number two, that is not good enough. Right from the CEO, the leadership team, even though they have no business to go and give a broadband connection at somebody's home, they said, we are going to be there in the field with the same protective gear, so that people know that we are not expecting some frontline sales guy to go and face the probability of getting COVID-19. We are also demonstrating that we are with them. The second priority, they said, is existing customers. Even at the cost of new customers, if existing customers have an issue, then we are going to prioritize, because many of their employees actually went to their native places because they got scared and they left big cities. And the third priority is the new customer acquisition. Tesco, for example, laid down some principles saying that stop forwarding random WhatsApp messages. And if you recall, in the beginning, there were thousands of WhatsApp messages with all kinds of news. So the Tesco created a committee saying that we are monitoring the World Health Organization, the Government of India side, and we are going to send you a WhatsApp if required. So you don't have to rely on the WhatsApp University for news. We will tell you what is relevant for you. I think a big challenge, once the initial realization dawned that this is not for 2 weeks or 1 month was how do we ensure that productivity continues to be high? Because in the initial few months, actually, contrary to reports, productivity actually went up for people. And that is something which I think is the phase where we are right now. I think the best workplaces have done a phenomenal job of building trust and therefore creating accountability. How do you sustain that energy level? And a lot of people are saying that we miss not meeting our colleagues. And even though we have so many of these digital events, the fact is that people are missing not seeing each other. On the other side, there are some benefits. For example, we have a client of ours called Vaibhav Global. It's a trading company and they're also into jewelry and gems. And I was told that in the entire last 6 months, one jewelry item which has really shot up in sales are earrings. And I was surprised. I said, why would earrings be sold so much? They say, thanks to Zoom calls, because you want to be presentable in the Zoom calls, and therefore earrings are more in demand. So there are some very funny examples of how certain things you didn't anticipate actually came up. For example, I went last weekend to book a off-roader. Mahindra, for example, is a company which is really focused on rural India, and their business is doing phenomenally well. Some of their businesses like Mahindra Finance is picking up. I wanted to buy an off-roader, and Mahindra has a vehicle called Thar, and I wanted it. And I was amazed. They said, sir, we have doubled our capacity in the factory, but you will have to wait for 9 months. I mean, I had not heard about 9 months waiting, for so many years. And so, which means that everybody is trying to get an off-roader and get out of the city and go to open spaces where they can. So my bet is that if you find next year, if you want to invest in stocks, invest in the hospitality industry, because people are going to travel like crazy.
Yes. And as we always say, of course, with every challenge comes a lot of opportunity as well. And we saw, as Jose mentioned, there is opportunity for organizations to reinvent themselves and to transform who they are, what they do, and their culture, as we see a lot of the hotels and travel organizations are doing in order to address a different kind of market requirement. And now we have a situation, I do have a few more items that I would like to touch on, but in the interest of time and the fact that several questions have come through of interest, I'm going to break away a little bit from the topics that I'm talking about and take a few questions to make this a little interesting. So I'll just put this up. The first question I would like you all to address is, in this current situation, companies have to be very agile. How has a good company managed teaching new skills and getting staff to do different jobs very quickly? How have good companies managed teaching new skills and getting staff to do different jobs very quickly? Agility is the question. Anyone?
Well, go ahead, PJ, if you want.
Yes, I can take a shot at it. And I think one of the realizations that we have had is that the traditional hierarchical triangular organizations do not do a good job of dealing with crises like this. And it is no wonder that we are trying to deal with a challenge today with an instrument or an equipment which is 200 years old, which was more suited for the Model T that Ford Motor Company used to produce, where you decide something once and then you have to just keep implementing it. So therefore, COVID has been used as a very good opportunity by some organizations to really smash a hierarchy in bureaucracy. For example, there is an organization which created multiple commando teams and control centers. And these commando teams, in my own organization, we had people in teams, and for the first time, a lot of people who have no interaction with customers, they got a chance to interact with customers. We met 250 customers and we interviewed them online and to figure out what is happening. And that's when we realized that there are actually about 700 companies in our database who are doing very well. It's not that everybody has got a budget squeeze and so on and so forth. So on the question of agility, I would say three things come to my mind. I think first and foremost is that the feedback process in organizations have now become real time. Gone are the days where you will do something will be more structured annually, etc. You may still do a comprehensive kind of feedback process annually, but today I know my employee feedback on a real-time basis. Right now, sitting here, I can see that my employee engagement has dropped from 78 to 76%. This is in my company because I'm just pressing a button and everybody is giving feedback once a day. Tesco knows what is the net promoter score on a daily basis. So I think when you make information available real-time to people, then it is easier for people to act on the information. That is number one. Number two is by creating these structures like the commando teams where hierarchy is not the biggest fulcrum, then you really find out who are the real leaders in the organization, 2 levels, 3 levels below the CEO. And that's a huge opportunity where you see leaders who can really take action and then come back and say, sorry, this did not work, and so on and so forth. Take accountability in other words. The third, I think, is very important thing, and I tried it and I will urge other CEOs to try it, is that go on a sabbatical. I think once you have dealt with the first 3 months of the crisis and you know what is going to work, what is not going to work, I think as a CEO, if you can show the confidence on your people and say that I am on a 1-month sabbatical and my leadership team will take any decision within a specified time frame, and you see how people develop, because nothing like a crisis to really build leadership capability in people. JC, you'd like to add?
Just following exactly what you are detailing here, what I always tell my customers is that the one thing that fuels all of the ones mentioned by PJ is trust. So if you want to know where does the real trick will happen, is by understanding what is the level of trust in the personal relationship that you have with your people, with your team. And by understanding what kind of leverages and knobs you can move to boost trust, and by actually take actions into that, you can actually have some sort of orientation about the real answer of how to, because sometimes we know what to do, but the how to do it is like what we do when we talk about the culture audit practices, when we collect all these amazing practices from many very, very outstanding organizations. They have very nice practices, but the problem is when the leader has to deliver them. That last mile of connection, when the leader delivers, when the interaction happens, if it's not done in a way that will boost or sustain or grow the trust, then the delivery actually probably will work against it or will definitely fail. I think there was a pretty high level of adrenaline here that was I think it was an advantage that it was floating in the environment, because there was adrenaline, there was the need to cope with the situation. And I think majority of people, when they had a pretty decent relationship with their management, they reacted well. And if the management welcomed this and took advantage of this goodwill that was showed at the beginning, if they followed up by taking care of how the relationship was creating and sustaining this trust relationship, then all these steps that were mentioned were doable and effective and more with a better results overall. So trust for me is definitely the way to go for this agility.
Okay, thank you very much, Bo. The second question I would like to pull up is, in Sri Lanka, the second COVID wave has come. Many cities are in lockdown. How can manufacturing companies survive during the lockdown? Non-online working organizations have a higher impact motivating their staff and keeping a good culture. Who would like that?
Well, let me start in this
Okay.
one, PJ,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Yes.
One thing that has been very, very interesting to learn about is I've been talking to a lot of management lately, as I was saying before, and the common thing that has been always in their toolbox as very, very useful for the time being is how they inspire their people, how they create inspiration, how they share a possible mission, a possible goal, a possible result ahead of them, despite the circumstances. I think it's very, very needed that the leaders nowadays, they jump into really revising everything that is related to how they inspire their people, how they give them orientation, how they give them assurance about what to do, why they're doing it, what for they're doing it. Of course, they have to overcome the shock, overcome the reaction, overcome, and think strategically about the transformation, and then bring all these elements into these inspiring formulas. But it has been very, very useful for the leaders to give this positive vision of the future, inspiring.
Yeah. So I think with reference to manufacturing, I can sense from where you are coming, and I think things are not as simple as it looks, because some of us actually thought that this could also be an opportunity for countries like Sri Lanka, India, and many others to build their manufacturing base, because when the virus initially started in China, at that point in time, people felt that there could be a window of opportunity for other countries as well, because most organizations in the West will now not depend on only one country as its manufacturing partner. That is unfortunately not happening. And the reason why it is not happening is because manufacturing is hugely complex and dependent on a supply chain which is spread all around. So you can get the workers in the factory, you can protect those workers, you can sanitize the factory. But what about all those small and medium enterprises who are supplying to the factory? And this entire supply chain is something which requires you to work with the industry association, with the government. And therefore, in India, I think probably the automobile industry is just about barely figuring it out right now. But there are still other manufacturing organizations who are still significantly disrupted. Even food companies where, online kind of food business has really gone up. But if you really try to order some material, they will say, oh, this one is out of stock or that one is out of stock, because the supply chain is not very robust. So my answer is that if it is a manufacturing company where supply chain is in your control, then it is possible for you to, to inspire the workers and to get the job done. There is a company called Trident in India where they increased the salaries of workmen by 35%. And that's in the word of the CEO and the founder and the owner. Normally it requires an owner to take that kind of decision. So he says that these guys, every day they come out, they look at the face of their partner, their wife or their children. And in spite of that, they say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to work. And this is that premium called for the trust that they have placed on me, that I'm going to make sure that the place is sanitized, protected, and it is my way of showing my gratitude. And as JC says, people who know how to show gratitude, they actually get it back.
Excellent. Very inspiring. PJ, we have now a question related to wellness. This did come up as one of the key areas that people were grappling with in terms of challenges as this culture shift takes place. The question is, what's the best way to introduce a wellness program in the organization to staff start a well-crafted wellness program? And what do you measure as positive outcomes of a well-thought-out wellness program?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges in wellness has been that there have been a plethora of activities, and almost all organizations have not been able to really create a strategy where there is a framework. Like Great Place to Work is a framework. So therefore, you know that how different pieces will fit into that framework. Getting a framework for wellness has not been very easy. So at Great Place to Work in India, we have been researching for last 2 years, and we just before COVID came up with a framework that has got 3 elements. The first element, of course, is some things that the organizations do that includes not just the infrastructure, the kind of autonomy people have, the leadership, and also the kind of practices that organizations have on wellness, because we studied wellness practices of thousands of best workplaces. But the third and the most important element, which is missing in most areas, is the role that the individual plays in his or her own wellness. So no wellness initiative can be complete without really nudging the individual employee to take charge of his or her wellness. Right? So when we do this assessment now using all the 3 lenses, what happens is, and this is a continuous process because you get a nudge every day. The employee can voluntarily decide to disclose how many hours of sleep he or she had and how many minutes of exercise that he or she did. And then organizations form different kinds of teams. For example, in my organization, we have teams of 10 people each. All of them are walking 10,000 steps every day. And there are certain norms. If you can be consistent with that, we have announced that at the end of the year, you can go to an European city of your choice, or it could probably be even in China, where you can walk, 140,000 steps in a week in 5 days, and we'll sponsor your trip. Right? So, in summary, while wellness is really, really important, we have very hard evidence on how wellness is impacting productivity or sick leave or many other parameters which are impacting the business. We have been doing things in bits and spurts. So I would urge you to really look at a framework, first of all, before you decide to invest money in A or B, and see are you doing things in a more integrated manner where all the 3, the leadership, the people practices, and the individual are getting targeted.
And let me complete that, PJ, just by saying it's important that what you mentioned, that is, it's a habit change thing. It cannot be just bringing and copying practices from some other companies, which is the traditional practice, particularly here in China. A lot of my customers and non-customers, they think that by bringing some of the Google practices, they will become immediately a great place to work with an amazing wellness. No, that's not the way it goes. It has to be about the habits of your people, about understanding them and about helping them to change it. So you have to find the motivation for that change. And it's not about giving them money, it's about helping them to foresee what the benefits of that will be. And again, it's a lot about how much do I trust my boss to tell me such a story, right? He's getting too close to who I am and what I do and how I manage many of my personal stuff. And in the Chinese culture, this feels a little bit too much invasion. But to be honest, this is something that you actually have to consider to really impact in an efficient way by the way that you're going to use your resources, your time, your efforts, and everything. And as I was also considering sharing, there's a lot of importance on listening intently and very dedicatedly to the feedback from the employees. What do they need? And build around that. But if you don't have enough trust there, they're not going to share real and fully authentic things. Then your decisions will be biased and so on and so forth. So it's a tricky question to be answered in an easy way, as PJ was saying. It's not easy. It should be considering all these elements.
Yes, but I think the crux of it is that you really have to understand what the requirements of employees, because the different types of employees, the different industries would have different needs and desires, age groups, the demographies, and then it's about addressing those in a meaningful way, as opposed to putting money into a well-being program.
And to be honest, you need partners, Shanika, to do this.
Sure.
You cannot do it by yourself, no matter how big is your company. You better go for partners, because I'm pretty sure that the number of activities that you will need to address all the different groups and needs, it's going to be a lot. And it's better that you take partners to do that.
Okay, so to move on to the next one, I'm just speaking from different areas so that our audience gets to experience solutions and insights from to address different aspects that are coming up. They say, please share some ideas for creative online events to build closer employee ties especially during work from home times. What are new practices introduced during this time? Are there any especially fun practices that stand out amongst GPTW award-winning companies in your regions? Anyone?
Well, I cannot hold this really quick.
Okay.
One thing that I really loved is that this IT company, they did, and if I don't disclose the name, is because of a special request about it, but they've done an amazing work of gamification. They've been doing a lot of interactions, even though they're scattered all around the city and sometimes different cities. They do a lot of treasure hunting, and they do like labyrinths that they receive the piece by email in a very creative and not necessarily big cost way, very active, a lot of fun. And it's an ongoing thing. It's constant. It's happening all the time. I think that is a that's the top level that I've heard. All this gamification around having interactive activities like these ones. The most common ones are the contests that are happening all around as well. And I'm pretty sure these can give a lot of good time and a lot of team building, because if you do contests, you have the advantage of allowing people to express themselves, to feel considered, to show their uniqueness, and that takes in a lot of very needed topics like inclusion and diversity and the uniqueness of the individual. All that will help a lot. As traditional as it may sound, when you're at home and you have to cook and do a cooking class from your kitchen, it takes already a lot of bravery to put together all the things and do it in front of all the team. And then it creates a follow-up whenever they can gather again just to try whatever you were preparing or things like that. So it's a lot about being creative and trying to do out-of-the-box things, just to keep it brief.
PJ, would you like to expand on that?
Oh, well, yes. I think in the first 1 month, we went completely overboard. Morning 6 a.m. is the yoga class. and evening 7 p.m. is the Zumba dance or Zumba class. So therefore, I think then it went to a rhythm where we are now probably meeting as a entire organization, not more than once or twice a month, but every week, each of the team is doing some fun stuff for the other. And one of the favorite things is, of course, having lunch together.
Online.
Online lunches.
Yes.
And I opened my big mouth and I said, nobody invites me. And then now almost every second day, I have one lunch or the other that I have to do online with with the teams. I really like the gamification bit. One manager I know, he spends only half an hour every week, but everyone takes a picture of work from home for me. So what does work from home mean? And there are funny pictures right now. Yeah. So Shanika, I can also sense that you have a dog or a pet who is there at home. So therefore, somebody will send a picture of his or her pet and all kinds of nice, interesting human kind of pictures. So yeah, and so these are some of the things. Yeah.
Yeah, so PJ is of course referring to things we're actually doing with Great Place to Work itself, as opposed to JC having talked about what some of his clients are doing. But either way, I think the important thing is to find new and exciting ways to connect. And the way to blend it most effectively, I think, is to try to bring the home life, or you're working from home. So you have to create that connect between home and what it is in your home environment, which is never the same as your work environment, and try to blend the two in order to make it happening, an exciting experience.
Yeah, and you can even include some members of your family, your children, your spouse, and it can be fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
in fact,
we'd have clients here who have done, art competitions and the whole family participates in the art competition, right? So those days it used to be, instead of children just drawing, collectively the parents and children have done art competitions, and then it becomes a company-wide competition. So that kind of activity where they're involved as a family unit here.
Yeah. There's a client of ours called Hela, and they did quite a few family activities digitally. And before they knew most of the partners, and most of them are women, they created their own WhatsApp group. And now they're running their own engagement. The partners of the employees are running their own engagement, almost parallelly. So yeah, it's for the first time we realized, thanks to COVID, that the unit is not the employee. The unit is the family. And therefore today in your engagement initiatives, you have to take into consideration that it is not the guy who is sitting in front of the camera on the laptop, but there are people around him, and sometimes fighting for the same bandwidth. And if you don't take into cognizance, his context, then you will probably not be able to engage.
Okay, so one last question. We do have many more, but in the interest of time, I'm going to put this one because it's quite different in terms of context. What is the effective way and strategies for marketing or promoting GPTW in the context of Great Place to Work during this COVID period or into the future, right? So this is obviously from a Great Place to Work company participant.
So and Jesse, if I can just quickly give my 1 minute brief on this. I love to tell people, particularly CEOs, that people may not remember your predecessor. People may not remember your successor, but people will never forget you. Whatever you did or you did not do during COVID-19 is something that people will remember for the rest of their lives.
True.
So those of us who, for a variety of reasons, were not amazing role models in leadership, COVID gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really build trust in the shortest possible time. And essentially, the first and foremost, COVID is all about, am I a leader that my people are going to follow when they have a choice? Maybe today they don't have a choice, but are they going to follow me? And what am I doing today to build that kind of trust? And second thing which I keep telling people is that, the kind of organization you want to create for the future, there is no better time than now, because everybody understands the need for change. As long as you can convey that I really deeply care for you and I have your interest in my mind, people are not going to argue about you want to implement, what is that, holacracy, or you want to implement humanocracy, or you want to be like Ricardo Semler. This is the best time for you to really figure out what the next 5 years can be like and what changes you want to implement with the support of your people. You don't need to hire expensive change management consultants.
Nice.
And
Jesse, any thoughts?
I think this situation, I totally agree with PJ. It's we are in an X-ray moment. We are being X-rayed, and everything that is happening, is gonna show there how resilient we are, how solid and confident we were already prepared as a culture. And I like a lot the ingredient that he's bringing up about being transcendent, because it's something that we are always looking forward to accomplish. We never know how many people, as we speak, are precisely in that decisive moment in their lives when they were caught by COVID. And as PJ is saying, COVID is really taking the snapshot for a memory in the history book of our lives. So
yeah.
What are you doing? What is your relationship with your management? What is your relationship with your colleagues? What is your relationship with your employees? What is happening around? It's so important because it can shape a lot of good decisions that you can take for further actions in the future. I think if we can take the opportunity in a very good way, we will become very, very strong, and that will be showed in the future.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very important moment, definitely.
And the last point that I would like to add, Shanika, with your permission, is that
sure.
I think in terms of why be a great place to work and what is your great place to work strategy, this is that moment in time where your line managers, those people managers, become the most important partner for you. Because when people are working at different places virtually or are dispersed, then the only person who actually knows what is happening in their lives is the supervisor who manages 5, 6, 10 people under him or her, right? And therefore, if you do nothing else but focus on how do you support your supervisors in managing their teams, that is something essential, because if you don't do that, you are running a big risk. So one thing that we haven't talked about is with everyone working from home, having access to company data on their laptop with members of the family who might be working with a competitor or with somebody else, etc. So therefore,
security.
There are going to be those stories which are going to come out. So just watch out in the next 6 months. And if you are not building those relationships, and your line managers have to build it with the teams, then you are running a big risk. And somebody said, how do you measure productivity when you're at home? Well, you don't have to if you have trust. And how do you build trust is the question, which is probably fundamental. Thank you.
Let me complete
Thank you.
from the first part that you were just saying, PJ, that I want to take the opportunity to send a message to the HR people. I was chatting with Shanika preparing for the event today, that it's a golden opportunity for HR. This situation has been empowering them. It can be an amazing opportunity for them to really orchestrate all this situation of that you were mentioning, how to get the best information out of the supervisors, how to give them a better orientation about what to do, how to deal, how to have a better relationship with the people, how to manage the feedback and the one-on-one conversation so you can get really, really good information. And again, towards the end goal, raise the level of trust. So I think HR is in a golden opportunity moment to become more and more and more strategic for the management, to become the right hand, which is a place that I always think they deserve. It's just that the elements, the scenario is set for them to take the opportunity and do an amazing job by coordinating all this.
Thank you, JC. You actually did take my last question off my mouth, because that was what I was going to ask about, the changing role of HR as we see this transition as the workplace culture shifts. And we have now really come to the end of our extended time frame. We extended this webinar by half an hour because we realized that we had a lot of content to share and a lot of insights that would be of value. So before I hand you back to Ruani, let me once again thank you for sharing those valuable insights from your learnings and experiences in the region to your clients, to your customers, and also from the industry at large. And on that note, let me hand it back to Ruani, who will wind up this webinar. Ruani?
Yes, Shanika. Right. Thank you very much, Shanika, for moderating the panel and for our panelists for their valuable insights. Before we move on to closing, I'd like to share some quick announcements with you, and we'd like to run a quick poll question. The poll question has actually two questions. What would you be interested in knowing about more in upcoming webinars and workshops? To create your own great place to work? Is it about developing the people manager capability in your organizations? Is it about crafting more effective people practices? Or is it understanding how you can tie in key business metrics with employee engagement? We saw, I think, PJ talking about how he's measuring employee engagement on a daily basis. So if you want to learn more about products and services around something like that, that would be how you're tying in business metrics with employee engagement as well. And this last question is, if you would like to know how you can create a great workplace in your organization and you want to know more information about what you can do, you can click yes as well. Right, so while you are answering the poll, I'll continue with some of our announcements. The reason that we are hosting this webinar today is because we had to unfortunately postpone our CXO briefing and conference due to the prevailing COVID pandemic situation in Sri Lanka. We are closely monitoring the situation, and we hope to host this event only once the government has deemed that it is safe to conduct public gatherings again. We have a tentative date as December 15th. That is reserved, but if that is not possible, we'll be looking at hosting this event in January 2021. The event is geared to bring people together to learn from great workplaces and will feature thought leaders and industry experts while revolving around the theme of thriving on chaos, the culture factor. We hope you all will be joining us there. The second part of this learning series, catering to our conference delegates, will be hosted on November 25th, where we'll be inviting more leaders from the regions to talk to us about what it is that they are doing to create a great workplace and what is it that they see in their best workplaces as well. The emailers will come to you with more details about this. It will be on a similar day at a similar time. Along with the opening registrations for our IT and ITES list for 2021, we are also hosting a public webinar to learn about how some of the best workplaces in the IT/ITES industry are creating and sustaining a great workplace culture. So this is all for the tech industry out there. It will be held on the 18th of November from 4 to 5, and all of y'all are welcome to join this. You will receive more information if you have subscribed to our emailers. And as you know, Great Place to Work model is evolving globally, and therefore it will be evolving in our local arena as well. So we'll be conducting a virtual workshop from the 11th to the 12th from 9 to 12 each day. And this is done to help organizations understand how anyone can create a high trust, high performance culture, to learn about the Great Place to Work model that is coming up new, the methodology, and the benefits of the same. Let us know if you would like to participate. It's happening tomorrow, but we can look at what we can do for you if you are interested. The investment has been reduced to only 6,500 per head for this particular workshop. So you can look to participate. It's a bargain. And even through the COVID pandemic, life must go on. So we are still going ahead with our multiple services and recognition opportunities. Any organization that finishes assessing before the conference is held will have the opportunity to receive their recognition on stage at this event. And in our lineup of lists, we will next be publishing the list of best workplaces for women for the year 2020 in partnership with Women in Management in December. For those of you who are not part of that yet and would like to participate, there is still time to sign up and complete the assessment within November to be eligible for this list as well. Feel free to contact us or any of our relationship managers for more details. We have a very short feedback form to gather your opinion about this webinar that will be available to you once you log off. You can answer it within your browser. We'd really appreciate your feedback in this. Thank you very much for your participation today, for staying with us until 5:30. We hope this was an insightful webinar, and we wish you a great week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruani. And thank you, PJ and Jose as well.
Thank you very much. Stay safe, guys.
You too, Jose.